Taliban leaders are expected back in Kabul within hours after arriving home from years in exile. They say they are aiming to meet former Afghan government officials over the next 2 days. The insurgent group insists they've changed and won't impose the same harsh restrictions they did when they last ruled Afghanistan. But many remain deeply skeptical.
The exodus out of Kabul continues. Hundreds of Westerners based in Afghanistan are back on home soil as the evacuation effort gathers pace. But for others, it's still a waiting game. Continuing chaos at the capital's airport make it almost impossible to flee. The insurgents have agreed for Kabul's airport to be open for evacuations, but getting there hasn't been easy. Checkpoints have been erected throughout the capital and near the airport's entrance. In Kandahar, a celebratory return. Taliban deputy leader and co-founder Mullah Baradar has touched Afghan soil for the first time in more than a decade. He arrived from Qatar, where he has spent months leading talks with the United States and Afghan peace negotiators. The Taliban have vowed that the second attempt at ruling Afghanistan will be very different from the first stint 2 decades ago.
موږ به ان شاء الله د شریعت په چوکاټ کې خزو ته د کار او فعالیت اجازه ورکو. خزه د ټولنې مهم عنصر ده او موږ دې ته په درناوي ګورو. د ټولنې په ټولو هغه برخو کې چې موږ ټولنه اړتیا ورته لري خزو به فعال حضور ولري.
But there's skepticism on the ground, especially from those who remember a time when women were confined to their homes and television and music were banned.
In 2 days, I don't see any girls in the street in Kabul. They are afraid. They are scared from Taliban.
خب باعث تشویشایی که همه مردم افغانستان فعلا دارن که های چی خواهد شد خدا نخواسته باز کدام مرج نشه و انشاءالله امیدوار هستیم که امارت اسلامی دوباره باز در افغانستان آمده که یک از این بدبختی و بیچارگی ما را نجات بده.
As Kabul slowly hums back to life, many Afghans say they have been left alone to see what the future under Taliban rule will look like.
To get a better understanding, Afghan journalist Fazel Qazizai joins us live from Kabul. Fazel, we're expecting exiled Taliban officials to arrive in Kabul shortly.
Yes, as you are aware that it was supposed the talks will be started between the Afghan Kabul-based politician and Taliban leaders in Doha, Qatar, but it seems that now the Taliban changed the plan. Their leadership in Doha arrived to Kandahar, and also one of the Qatar political office member, Junior Haqqani, Mr. Anas Haqqani, also is part of this delegation that he did arrive to Kabul today. He had his first meeting with former President Hamid Karzai, with Dr. Abdullah, and also with another jihadi leader, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. So it seems that the Taliban are trying to hold the intra-Afghan talks inside the country instead of Doha. And it seems that the primary meeting and readiness for holding a grand meeting between Taliban and Kabul-based politicians about the coming regime and running system is started.
Fazel, we understand as well that businesses are slowly starting to reopen in Kabul. And give us a sense of what the mood on the ground is like.
Yes, as you are aware that in the start, the shops and markets were all closed. People were panicked. But when they saw the Taliban with their first arrival, which were totally friendly, totally non-violent, and they were dealing with everyone, was very nice, very fair. So this gave a kind of morality for Afghans and courage for Afghans to go out. Today was different than yesterday. It was looked like more normal. Lots of shops, markets, and business were open. We could see lots of men, women, children, girls out as normal as before, with the same, especially women with the same appearance or style as they were before. We saw some TV presenter and other journalists, female journalists, that they were out covering stories and composing reports with the same style as they were before. But unfortunately, still banks are closed and governmental services are shut down, which is a big concern, and also which is a kind of psychological which has a psychological impact on Kabul as that.
Yeah, thank you very much for getting us up to speed. Fazel Qazizai there, journalist from Afghanistan.
For The View from Washington, D.C., Simon Marks joins us live now. Simon, those evacuations are picking up, but the fate of many Afghans who worked with the United States, that's still unclear.
Yeah, and not just many Afghans, thousands of American citizens who remain in Afghanistan. The numbers keep shifting, but the White House now says they believe that there may be as many as 12,000 Americans in Afghanistan, that the Americans want to get out of Afghanistan. They, like the Afghans who have worked with the Americans and assisted the Americans over the last 20 years, have a huge challenge still, which is getting to the airport, despite that safe passage guarantee that the White House said it had received yesterday from the Taliban. There are all sorts of reports from Kabul of blockages and difficulties that people are facing in making their way to the airport. Some of those relate to documentation, people who have lost their passports, lost their identity documents, in some cases chosen to conceal their identification documents because they demonstrate that they had relationships with Afghan special forces or with the United States. So for the Biden administration, this crisis is by no means over. And over the next few hours, White House officials are going to have to explain how they are going to make it possible for all of those people to get to the airport in order for many of these planes that are leaving not to be leaving largely empty.
And speaking of explanations, Simon, Joe Biden's back in Washington now, and he's facing calls for an investigation into how things went so wrong.
Yeah, I think there are going to be numerous investigations and inquiries in the weeks and months ahead. And we know that the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, who is publicly backing what she calls Joe Biden's resolute leadership on Afghanistan, has now announced that she is going to begin the process of congressional hearings in the House next week. Top Biden administration cabinet officials, some of them now on a daily basis, being asked whether they have considered resigning over the botched military withdrawal, are going to face, certainly at the hands of Republicans and at the hands of some Democrats, very complicated questions. And one key focus that I suspect we'll be hearing a lot about is why on earth, if the US government thought there was any possibility of having to launch some kind of airlift from Kabul of American diplomats, civilians and Afghans, why on earth did they abandon the Bagram Air Force Base several weeks ago, only to find themselves in a situation where they then had to stand up a relief operation involving thousands of American troops at Kabul International Airport? The questions here mounting up for a Biden administration that wants to keep the focus on the president's decision to authorize the withdrawal itself rather than the botched nature of it.
A very long list of those questions need to be answered. Simon, thank you very much for that.